Greetings, my dear viewer. This is a channel about marital infidelity and about the consequences if one spouse starts to cheat on the other. If you, as well as I do, support true family values and condemn cheating, then subscribe to the channel and give this video a like. Let's get started. Without warning, the man burst into the home, his voice laced with venom as he hurled an insult. "Hey, you! I'm talking to you," Max spat, his eyes locking onto Elijah. "You're a loser. I'm taking your wife out tonight, and I'll make sure she's satisfied until morning. You can't stop me. She's been putting in a lot of effort and deserves more than what you can offer. Honestly, I'm doing her a favor." Present day. The evening had settled into an uncommon calm, offering Elijah a brief moment of solace. His small apartment, tucked away in a quiet part of the city, had become his refuge over the past few months. Nights of solitary meals and the distant murmur of urban life defined his days, wrapping him in a cocoon of isolation. This was meant to be a time of recovery, a space for introspection after recent upheavals. But instead, Elijah found himself stuck in a relentless cycle, constantly replaying the night that upended everything. That night had started like any other. After a long day at work, Elijah returned home, expecting to unwind with old movie reruns or a dusty book. Then, an unexpected knock shattered the routine. To his shock, Lucy, his wife of 6 years, stood at the door, her expression making his heart skip a beat. It was a look he hadn't seen in a long time, a mix of searching and uncertainty. "Hey," she greeted softly, her voice hesitant. "Can we talk?" Elijah blinked, caught off guard by her presence. Their last interaction had ended in a heated argument, followed by weeks of silence. He hadn't anticipated seeing her again so soon, but something in her demeanor urged him to step aside and let her in. "I wasn't sure if I should come back," Lucy began, avoiding his gaze as she walked inside. "But I need to explain. Everything that's happened, Elijah. I need you to understand." Elijah remained silent, closing the door behind her while his mind raced through a whirlwind of thoughts. What did she want now? After abandoning their shared life, what explanation could she possibly offer? "I've been seeing someone else," she confessed after a long pause, her words cutting through the tension like a blade. "His name is Max. He was there when you weren't. I thought I was making the right decision, but now everything is falling apart. I never wanted to hurt you, Elijah." At the mention of Max, Elijah felt his stomach turn. The nights he had spent wondering about Lucy's growing distance now had a painful clarity. Hearing her admit it was like a punch to the gut. "You think I can just accept this?" Elijah's voice rose, his bitterness barely concealed. He struggled to hold back, the cold fury in his chest overpowering his restraint. "You left me, Lucy. You walked away from everything we built for someone you hardly know." Lucy flinched at his words, but pressed on, her voice quivering. "I never intended for this to happen. But it did, and I can't take it back. I know I've hurt you, but I don't know how to make it right." Elijah shook his head, disbelief etched on his face. "You don't get it, do you?" he whispered. "You chose him over me, and now you want me to just move on? I've been trying to piece my life back together, and now you're here, asking for what? Another chance?" Lucy stood in silence, her eyes filled with regret. For a brief moment, Elijah felt the stirrings of potential forgiveness, but the weight of her betrayal was overwhelming. "I can't do this, Lucy," Elijah said, his voice filled with unexpected finality. "You made your choice. You chose him, and I won't keep fighting for something you threw away." Lucy opened her mouth to speak, but Elijah raised a hand to stop her. "I don't want to hear it. You made your bed, now lie in it." He turned away, leaving her speechless. The room felt stifling, and he needed air, time to process. He wasn't sure how long it was before he heard the door click shut behind her, but when it did, he felt a strange sense of relief. The overwhelming silence of the apartment now felt familiar. Elijah sank into the couch, his eyes fixed on the spot where Lucy had stood. His chest ached, but clarity began to set in. She had betrayed him, and now she was gone. Elijah refused to let this define him. He would not drown in misery and self-pity anymore. He was determined to move forward, ensuring Lucy regretted the day she walked out. His mind whirred with plans, each sharper and more calculated than the last. The first step was to understand Max. Elijah knew he had to uncover Max's weaknesses, to expose any secrets he might be hiding. Max had played a part in this betrayal, and he would face the consequences. Elijah started his investigation, delving into Max's online presence, hunting for any vulnerability. Days passed, and Elijah discovered a small business Max had started a year ago. It was modest, a side project, but it could be a chink in his armor. Elijah made a mental note to dig deeper. His determination grew when he reconnected with Mark, an old college friend and corporate lawyer who could provide the resources and information Elijah needed. "What do you need?" Mark asked over drinks, intrigued by Elijah's intensity. "I need everything on Max's business," Elijah said, leaning in. "Every transaction, every deal. There's got to be something." Mark, impressed by Elijah's resolve, nodded. "I'll see what I can find. But you know this won't be cheap, right?" Elijah's eyes narrowed. "I'll make sure he regrets ever crossing me." Mark chuckled. "All right, let's get to work." Elijah moved with unwavering resolve. "The price is irrelevant," he stated firmly. "I just need them to confront what's inevitable." Each day, his determination deepened. The sting of betrayal had lingered far too long, and his mind was already crafting a meticulous plan for vengeance. Patience was the key. Elijah realized he couldn't rush this. It required careful orchestration, precise timing, and above all, a devastating impact. He was adamant that Lucy and Max would answer for everything: the shattered trust, the humiliation, and the ruin of what they had once created together. As promised, Mark came through, and within a week, Elijah held a folder packed with invaluable details. Max's seemingly benign business was far from innocent. Hidden in its financial records were inconsistencies, dubious investments, and countless shady transactions. It soon became evident that Max's company was more than just a harmless enterprise. It was a front for far darker activities. Maintaining his composure, Elijah stepped aside, allowing her to enter the apartment. He guided her to the table, where they sat in tense silence. Lucy looked uneasy, but Elijah offered no comfort. This wasn't a time for reassurance. It was a time for reckoning. As Lucy's eyes darted around nervously, Elijah slid a folder across the table. She hesitated before opening it, her breath catching as she flipped through the pages, each one revealing Max's impending financial doom. That night, Elijah sat in his apartment, poring over the documents Mark had provided. His hands trembled slightly, not from fear, but from a different kind of thrill. This was the power of knowledge, the power to control. Max and Lucy had no idea what was about to hit them. They had underestimated him, and now they would pay dearly for that mistake. Elijah's phone buzzed, interrupting his thoughts. It was a message from Lucy. "Elijah, can we talk? I know things aren't perfect, but I need you to understand. Max isn't who I thought he was. I made a mistake. Please hear me out." A bitter smile spread across Elijah's face as he read her words. She was desperate now, wasn't she? She was finally realizing the weight of her choices. She had chosen excitement over stability, passion over trust, and now she was facing the repercussions. But Elijah was no longer a man who would offer forgiveness, not after everything. His response was short. "You made your choice, Lucy. There's nothing left to discuss." A surge of satisfaction coursed through him as he sent the message, but it wasn't enough. The next phase of his plan was still to come. He wanted to see their entire world collapse. First, He made sure Max's business dealings were exposed. He didn't simply hand the evidence to the authorities. No, Elijah wanted Max to squirm, struggling to hold his empire together as it disintegrated. Anonymous tips were sent to various regulatory agencies, including the IRS, unveiling Max's fraudulent activities. Within hours, investigations were underway. Max's accounts were frozen, and legal complaints flooded in. But Elijah didn't stop there. He used his knowledge to strike even harder. A few well-placed calls and emails ensured Max's critical clients were informed of his illicit dealings. The fallout was immediate. Furious investors pulled out, lawsuits loomed, and Max's reputation crumbled. Elijah knew it was only a matter of time before Max's business fell apart completely. As for Lucy, Elijah had an even more ruthless plan in store. She had been so confident when she left him, believing Max's world would be her paradise. Elijah intended for her to feel the full force of the pain and humiliation she had inflicted on him. She would know what it was like to lose everything, to watch her perfect world shatter. Lucy had depended on Max's wealth, accustomed to the luxury he provided. That was about to disappear. With a single phone call, Elijah ensured Lucy's financial security was obliterated. He convinced Max's accountant to leak critical financial documents to the press. Within days, the media descended on Max's business, and the ensuing scandal was unavoidable. Lucy's bank accounts were frozen, her credit cards maxed out, and she had nowhere to turn. Max's penthouse, the one she had so eagerly left Elijah for, was seized by authorities as part of the investigation. Her lavish lifestyle, the car, the designer clothes, was stripped away. But Elijah wasn't done yet. He had one final move, the most satisfying of all. He arranged for Lucy to receive an invitation. A simple dinner, he said, with no hidden agenda, just a chance to reconnect and close their chapter. It was the perfect trap. When she arrived, she would be faced with the harsh reality of her downfall. On the evening of the dinner, Elijah calmly set the table, his heart racing in anticipation, though outwardly he remained composed. Lucy would expect something different. She would expect redemption, but instead, she would encounter the consequences of her actions. When the doorbell rang, Elijah's heart skipped a beat. He opened the door to find Lucy standing there, looking as if she had walked out of a nightmare. Her eyes were red, her once confident posture now slumped in defeat. She hadn't anticipated this. "Elijah," she said softly, her voice heavy with emotion. "I don't know what else to do. I have no one else. Please hear me out. I've lost everything. I was wrong, so wrong." Elijah's voice was low as he responded, "I've been busy. It's amazing what you can uncover when you know the right people." Lucy's face turned pale as she grasped the extent of his actions. "You did this?" she whispered, her voice trembling. Elijah nodded, his gaze cold and steady. "Yes, and there's more where that came from. You chose to live in a world of lies and deceit, Lucy. Now you're trapped in it." Her hands shook as she reached for her phone, probably intending to call Max, but Elijah had already anticipated this. Max's lines were monitored, his contacts systematically severed. "You think he'll save you?" Elijah's voice dripped with disdain. "He's gone, Lucy. His empire is collapsing, and you're sinking with it. Everything you thought you had is slipping away." The silence between them grew heavy as Lucy's eyes filled with tears, but Elijah remained unmoved. "I didn't think it would end like this," she stammered. "I never meant for any of this to happen. Elijah, please. I was foolish, blind. Can't we try again? I miss you. I miss us." Elijah leaned back, scrutinizing her face as her regret hung in the air. "No, Lucy. You don't get to come back from this. You made your choice, and now you'll live with the consequences." He stood slowly, walking toward the door. "It's over. It's been over for a long time. Goodbye, Lucy." As Lucy sat trembling, Elijah felt only a strange satisfaction. She had thought she could leave, build a life with Max without facing the fallout. She had underestimated the depth of his pain and his resolve. With a final look at the woman who had once meant everything to him, Elijah left the room, closing the door behind him with a sense of finality. My friend, and this is the end of the story. If you liked this story, then put your royal like and subscribe to the channel. May the force be with you. Greetings, my dear viewer. You're on the channel The Price of Cheating. The channel is for those who appreciate traditional family values and condemn adultery. So be sure to subscribe to the channel. Let's get started. I'm Nicholas, 34 years old, and life recently dealt me a hard lesson. Being married to someone who sees you as a wallet instead of a partner is a straight path to unhappiness. Let me take you back to what I once considered my glory days. When I first met Violet, she was electric, full of energy, laughter, and just the right dose of unpredictability to keep things exciting. Back then, we couldn't keep our hands off each other. Every glance, every touch carried a spark. But here's the twist. Marriage, as I've learned, has a way of draining the fire. 4 years in, our so-called fairy tale had devolved into a monotonous routine. One evening, after yet another "not tonight, I'm tired" excuse, I decided to bring it up. That turned out to be a big mistake. Violet, with the patience of someone explaining basic math to a child, calmly said, "Nicholas, I don't owe you anything in the bedroom." I stared at her, stunned. "You're kidding, right?" I asked. But she wasn't. "I'm your wife, not your property," she added, wearing a smug expression like she'd just uncovered the secret to world peace. Meanwhile, I was left grappling with how we'd ended up here. Don't get me wrong. I wasn't demanding intimacy on a schedule. But when your partner essentially declares that physical connection is no longer a part of your marriage, it makes you question if you're in a relationship or just living with an indifferent roommate. Violet, I reasoned, this isn't just about intimacy. It's about intimacy, about us. She sighed, exasperated, as if I were overcomplicating something simple. Nicholas, we're fine. You always overthink things. Spoiler alert, we were anything but fine. In the months that followed, I made every effort to bridge the growing gap. I planned surprise date nights, cooked her favorite meals, and even tackled the laundry, a task I despise. Her response? The same every time, a quick peck on the cheek, as if I were a helpful co-worker rather than her husband. Desperate, I suggested counseling, hoping a professional could help us reconnect. She laughed, not just a chuckle, but a full-blown cutting laugh. Nicholas, therapy isn't going to make me want you more. That one stung. Still, I refused to give up. I scheduled a session anyway, clinging to a sliver of hope. But Violet wouldn't budge. Why can't you just accept that this is who I am now? She asked, rolling her eyes. Marriage is not just about intimacy. And that's when it hit me. Violet had no intention of changing. And really, why was I the one begging for basic care in my own marriage? Something shifted in me that day. I realized I was done pleading. No one should have to feel like a door-to-door salesman pitching intimacy to their spouse. I decided to focus on myself instead. I started working out, reached out to old friends, and picked up woodworking again, a long-forgotten hobby. But even as I poured myself into self-improvement, Violet's apathy loomed over me, making me question if the issue was me or if she just didn't care anymore. Then, out of nowhere, Violet dropped a bombshell. One afternoon, she walked into the living room with a beaming smile. "I've been thinking," she began, her tone unusually upbeat. "Maybe it's time we start trying for kids." I nearly choked. "Kids? Are you serious?" "Yes, Nicholas. We're not getting any younger. It's the next logical step." Logical step? I stared at her in disbelief. "Violet, we've been intimate twice this year. Twice. And you think it's a good time for a baby?" Her smile faltered briefly before snapping back. "Well, maybe it's something we can work on." Convenient timing, right? My frustration boiled over, and I left the room before I said something I couldn't take back. That night, as I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, her suggestion gnawed at me. Raising a child in a marriage where one partner had emotionally checked out wasn't just daunting, it was downright terrifying. By morning, my decision was clear. I contacted a lawyer and had divorce papers drawn up by the end of the week. When I handed them to her, Violet's reaction was explosive. "What the hell is this?" she demanded, holding the papers as if they were on fire. "It's a divorce petition," I said, my tone calm but resolute. "This isn't working anymore." She looked at me, stunned. "You're serious?" "Completely." For the first time in years, she didn't have a snappy comeback. She just sat there, speechless. The days that followed were a whirlwind of tears, arguments, and accusations. "I thought you loved me," she sobbed. "I do," I replied. "But love isn't enough without effort from both sides." As I packed my things, Violet made one last attempt to salvage what we had. She appeared in the doorway one evening wearing lingerie I hadn't seen in years, with props to match. "Nicholas," she purred, "let's give this another try." For a fleeting moment, I hesitated. But reality quickly set in. Where was this energy when it mattered? Why did it take divorce papers to spark action? "I'm sorry, Violet," I said, stepping past her. "It's too late." Her jaw dropped. "You're really going to throw this away?" "No," I replied, turning to face her. "You already did." After that, she tried every tactic: seduction, guilt trips, and my personal favorite, the "you'll never do better than me" speech. But I stood firm. "Let's not rewrite history," I told her as I zipped up my bag. "This is the right choice for both of us." With that, I walked out, never looking back. The first few nights were rough. I stayed in a hotel, sorted out our accounts, and took steps to ensure the separation was clean and fair. My lawyer's advice was clear: keep things simple and above board. A few days later, my sister called. "Come stay with me," she offered. "You need to be around family." By the weekend, I was back in my hometown, starting over. It felt surreal, but for the first time in years, I felt like I was on the path to something better. Here's a high-quality retelling of your text, rewritten entirely while preserving its meaning and narrative style. The home we'd built together, the shared routines, the life we'd once nurtured, all of it was behind me now. But Violet? She wasn't ready to move on, not even close. It started with the messages. "I miss you. Can we talk? I know I messed up. Please, just give me one more chance. This isn't who we are, Nicholas." I ignored them all. My lawyer had advised keeping contact to a minimum, and honestly, I had no desire to fall back into her web of manipulation. Then came the voicemails, her voice tinged with desperation. "Nicholas, please. I'll do anything to make things right. Just come back." Back? To a place that had stopped feeling like home long ago? A week later, Violet escalated her efforts. I was sitting in the living room with my sister, chatting and catching up, when my phone buzzed. It was another message from Violet. I hesitated, then opened it. What I saw left me stunned. The photo showed her in provocative lingerie, holding a bottle of champagne with the caption, "Let's toast to a fresh start." My sister caught a glimpse over my shoulder and burst out laughing. "Wow, she's really pulling out all the stops," she said. "Yeah," I replied, shaking my head and quickly deleting the picture. Violet's persistence knew no bounds. By the end of the month, I'd moved into my own apartment. It wasn't anything fancy, just a simple, cozy space for me to start over. But it was mine. I threw myself into work, reconnected with old friends, and started rediscovering who I was outside the confines of that marriage. One night, while aimlessly scrolling through social media, I stumbled upon a post from Violet. She was out with friends, her face lit up with a smile, as if the past few months hadn't happened. The caption read, "Here's to new beginnings." I couldn't help but chuckle. For someone who once claimed she couldn't live without me, she seemed to be managing just fine. But then, putting up appearances had always been Violet's specialty. Not that everything was perfect for me either. Some days felt painfully lonely. Some nights, I questioned my choices, wondering if I'd ever meet someone who truly understood me. But over time, those feelings gave way to a quiet contentment, a peace I hadn't felt in years. I was finally living life on my own terms. The divorce went smoother than expected. It wasn't pleasant. Endless forms, meetings with lawyers, and strained conversations with Violet where she played the victim. But it was civil. She wanted the house, and I was more than happy to let her have it. The memories tied to that place were ones I didn't need to carry anymore. We agreed she'd pay me half its value over 5 years, with strict terms enforced by my lawyer. No delays, no excuses. Violet tried to push back, but I stood firm. Everything else, bank accounts, furniture, the works, was divided without issue. When it was over, I felt lighter, like a burden had been lifted off my shoulders. 2 months later, just as I was settling into my new life, an unexpected call came from Jake, an old friend. "Dude," he said, barely able to contain his laughter, "you won't believe who Violet's dating now." I sighed. "Do I even want to know?" "Oh, trust me you do," he replied. The new guy was named Trevor. A quick social media search revealed a photo of Violet and Trevor smiling in front of her house. Trevor, wearing a tank top with "Hustle Hard" written across it, sported tattoos that looked like a bored teenager's doodles. I couldn't stop laughing. Jake filled me in on the details. Apparently, Trevor was a self-proclaimed serial entrepreneur, which translated to hawking knockoff energy drinks out of his car and pretending to be an influencer to a mere 512 followers. He'd been divorced twice and was infamous for couch surfing with girlfriends. "He's already living with her," Jake added. "The guy doesn't even have his own place. Classic Violet." Instead of bitterness, I felt an odd sense of relief. If this was her idea of an upgrade, I'd clearly dodged a bullet. Still, I couldn't help but wonder how long it would take her to realize what she'd traded stability for. Not that it mattered to me anymore. After the chaos of the divorce and the comedic spectacle of Trevor, I decided I needed a night off. No work, no unpacking, no overthinking. I headed to a craft beer bar downtown. The vibe was lively but relaxed, with rows of taps boasting names like Apocalypse and Pineapple Express IPA. I ordered a flight and let myself unwind for the first time in months. I was halfway through a rich chocolate stout when she walked in. Her auburn hair, confident smile, and effortlessly cool leather jacket immediately caught my attention. She slid onto the stool beside me, glanced at my beer flight, and smirked. "Trying to drink the entire menu?" she teased. I laughed. "Just narrowing down my favorites. Got any recommendations?" "Depends," she said with a grin. "Are you a hops guy or more of a mask the booze with fruit guy?" "I like to think I'm versatile," I replied, earning a laugh from her. "Then try the mango saison," she said. "Trust me." Her name was Samantha, Sam, as she insisted, and we clicked instantly. Over the next hour we talked about everything: travel, beer, and even the age-old debate about pineapple on pizza. She was firmly against it, while I played it safe with neutrality. Her energy was light and self-assured, a refreshing change from the emotional whirlwind I'd just left behind. When the bartender announced last call, I realized I didn't want the night to end. "Look," I began, summoning more courage than I felt. "This has been great. Would you want to grab dinner sometime? My treat." Her smile widened. "Bold move, asking me out when I'm a drink ahead of you? But yeah, I'd like that." We exchanged numbers, and for the first time in what felt like forever, I left a bar with a genuine smile. A few days later, we met at a quaint Italian restaurant. Over pasta and wine, we shared stories: her work as a graphic designer, my newfound passion for woodworking, and even the hilarious mishap that led to her adopting a ferret. Eventually, the conversation shifted to past relationships. It was inevitable. "So," she asked, swirling her wine, "any crazy exes?" I laughed. "Oh, you have no idea." I gave her the short version. Married young, things fell apart, and now I was rebuilding. She listened closely, her gaze steady and kind. "And her?" she asked. "What's she like?" "Oh, you'll love this," I said, pulling out my phone. I showed her the photo of Violet and Trevor. "That's her and her new, whatever he is." Sam's eyes widened as she studied the picture. Then, to my surprise, she burst out laughing. "Wait," she said, handing the phone back to me. The name rang a bell immediately. My eyebrows shot up, startled. "You know him?" "Yeah," she said, settling comfortably into her chair. Trevor used to hang around with some of my friends. She paused, then added with a knowing smirk, complete mooch, by the way. But here's the kicker. I've seen him with your ex before. This wasn't recent either. It was months ago. I stiffened. What do you mean, months ago? Lowering her voice, she leaned in closer. I mean, I saw them together at a party. They were holding hands. This was long before you even mentioned the divorce. Her words hit me like a freight train. My mind raced, drawing connections I hadn't noticed before. If what she said was true, and I had no reason to doubt her, it meant Violet and Trevor's involvement wasn't some fleeting post-divorce affair. It had started while we were still married. Sam must have caught the stunned look on my face because she reached over, her hand resting gently on mine. Hey, are you okay? I let out a slow breath. Yeah, just trying to wrap my head around all of this. She gave me a kind smile. For what it's worth, you're better off without her. Trevor's the type who'll take everything he can and leave when there's nothing left. I couldn't help but grin faintly. Noted. Dinner came to an end, and as we said our goodbyes, she pulled me into a warm hug. Don't let this drag you down, she said softly. You've got so much better waiting for you. Later that evening, I sat alone on my couch, gazing at the quiet glow of the city skyline. Her words echoed in my mind as I replayed the conversation. Weeks had passed since that night with Sam, yet the revelations she shared continued to resurface, not with bitterness or regret, but with an odd sense of clarity, like finally solving a puzzle I didn't know I was trying to complete. Fragments of my marriage floated to the surface. Little things that seemed unimportant at the time now screamed for attention. The late nights at work, her sudden obsession with gym sessions when she'd never cared about fitness, the way she guarded her phone like it was Fort Knox, and then the distance, the coldness that crept in toward the end. Initially, I'd blamed myself. Maybe I wasn't interesting enough. Maybe I wasn't successful enough or attentive enough. I tore myself apart looking for answers. But then, the truth emerged like a blinding light. It wasn't me. It was never me. Everything began to click after Sam's story about Trevor. If Violet had been seeing him long before we split, who's to say he was the first? The pieces aligned in a way that churned my stomach. The indifference, the emotional withdrawal, the rejection of intimacy. It wasn't just boredom or a fading spark. She'd likely moved on long before I even knew the cracks in our marriage existed. And the most painful realization? She let me bear the weight of it. I was the one desperately trying to fix something she'd already discarded. Yet in the midst of all this, an unexpected feeling surfaced. Relief. It was liberating. Violet's choices didn't define my worth or the effort I put into our relationship. They revealed her character instead, her selfishness, her lack of communication, her endless craving for validation. For so long, I'd carried the guilt of not being enough. But now the truth was as clear as day. The problem had never been me. Now she was Trevor's problem. The thought brought a quiet laugh. She'd need all the luck she could get. As for me, life felt lighter. Sam and I had been spending more time together, and every moment with her felt like a breath of fresh air. She was kind, genuinely funny, and refreshingly straightforward. There were no hidden agendas or cryptic games to figure out. Talking to her was easy, like reconnecting with an old friend while uncovering someone entirely new. It was still early, and I wasn't rushing into anything. But for the first time in years, I felt something unfamiliar yet welcome. Hope. Hope for something honest. Something where I didn't have to fight to feel seen or valued. And that felt like the start of something good. This concludes the story. If you like it, then put your powerful like and subscribe to the channel.